Picture Canada in the winter of 1982. Factories in Ontario were going dark. Oil rigs in Alberta were shutting down. The unemployment lines are stretching around city blocks like something out of a black and white documentary about the Great Depression. You're a young worker in Toronto. Yesterday you had a steady job in manufacturing. Today your boss calls everyone into the break room and says 3 words that echo across the country. We're shutting down. Within months, unemployment explodes past 12%. Entire industries stall. Homeowners lose their houses. Businesses disappear overnight. And Canada suffers one of the worst recessions in its modern history. Now, here's the part almost nobody remembers. That collapse wasn't caused by some exotic crisis or financial scandal. It came from a deadly mix of high interest rates, an oil shock, heavy debt, and global trade pressure. Sound familiar? Because the same ingredients are quietly reappearing in the mid-2020s. And if history rhymes the way it usually does, Canada could be walking toward a slowdown that looks eerily like the early 1980s, only this time with more debt, more leverage, and fewer escape routes. Let me show you why. In 1981 and 1982, Canada's economy didn't just slow down, it contracted violently. Real GDP fell by roughly 5% during the downturn. Unemployment surged toward 13%. According to historical labor data, joblessness averaged over 11% in 1982 and climbed near 12% in 1983. That meant hundreds of thousands of Canadians suddenly had no income. Factories closed, construction sites froze, and small businesses, restaurants, auto shops, local retailers collapsed like dominoes. At the peak of the crisis, over 2 million jobs were effectively wiped out or disrupted across the economy. Entire regions entered economic depression-like conditions. But the collapse didn't happen overnight. It was the result of a chain reaction, like a slow-burning fuse finally reaching the dynamite. And the fuse started with interest rates. In the late 1970s, inflation was running out of control across the Western world. Prices were rising at double-digit rates. Central banks panicked, so they did what central banks always do when inflation gets scary. They slammed the brakes. Interest rates shot up to levels that would feel almost unreal today. Mortgages hit the mid-teens. Business loans became suffocatingly expensive. Credit cards were practically financial weapons. Imagine trying to run a bakery where your oven costs 18% interest per year. That's not a business, that's a countdown clock. Households stopped spending, businesses stopped investing, construction collapsed, and the entire economy started shrinking. This is what economists call a rate shock recession. It's when the cure for inflation becomes so powerful that it kills the patient. And here's the uncomfortable part. Canada in the mid-2020s just went through one of the fastest rate hiking cycles in modern history. The Bank of Canada pushed borrowing costs to multi-decade highs to fight inflation. Mortgage payments surged, businesses faced higher financing costs, consumers started pulling back. You see the pattern. But interest rates alone didn't cause the 1980s collapse. There was a second ingredient: oil. In the late 1970s, oil prices had surged after global shocks. Energy dominated large parts of Canada's economy. Then, in the early 1980s, global demand weakened and oil markets turned volatile. When oil falls, energy provinces slow down, investment dries up, government revenues shrink, jobs disappear. The economy starts bleeding from multiple wounds at once. Fast forward to the 2020s, and Canada is still deeply tied to resource cycles. Oil remains a major export, and global demand is now shaped by trade wars, geopolitical tension, and energy transitions. According to Reuters, new U.S. tariffs in 2025 threatened Canada's recovery, with analysts warning they could push unemployment toward 8% and erase years of growth, because roughly 75% of Canadian exports go to the U.S. So once again, Canada faces a familiar combination: high rates, trade tension, and commodity uncertainty. But here's where the comparison gets truly unsettling: debt. In the early 1980s, Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio was around 65%. That was considered high at the time. It limited government flexibility and made the country vulnerable to rising interest costs. Today, the numbers are much heavier. Canada's gross government debt stood around 110% of GDP in 2024 and is projected to rise toward 115% by 2026. That's almost double the relative debt burden of the early 1980s. And remember, this isn't just government debt. Canadian households also carry some of the highest debt levels in the developed world, largely tied to housing. So imagine the same recession as 1982, but this time everyone is twice as leveraged. That's not a slowdown, that's a potential debt shock. Think of an economy like a house built on stilts. In the early 1980s, the stilts were about 6 feet high. Today, they're more like 12. The higher you build, the harder the fall. Now let's talk about the job market. In the early 1980s, unemployment didn't just spike, it stayed high for years. According to economic studies, joblessness remained above 10% until the mid-1980s, even after the recession officially ended. That's what economists call a jobless recovery. Businesses cut staff during the crisis. Then, when growth returned, they didn't rehire quickly. Productivity improvements and automation kept payrolls low. The result? A lost generation of workers. Young people entering the workforce during that period faced years of unstable employment, lower wages, fewer opportunities, delayed homeownership, delayed families. And here's the eerie echo. Recent labor data shows Canada's job market already softening. In 2026, unemployment hovered around 6.5%, while job losses hit certain sectors like manufacturing. Economists expected subdued growth around 1.5% annually. That's not a crisis yet, but it's the kind of slow weakening that often comes before one. Because recessions rarely start with a bang, they start with a whisper. A few layoffs here, a hiring freeze there, a factory closing quietly in the background. And then suddenly, the numbers start jumping. Now let's talk about trade, because trade was the final turning point of the 1980s story. After the recession, Canada faced a brutal reality. Its economy was stagnating, growth was weak, unemployment remained high, and the country needed a structural fix. That fix came in the form of free trade. In the late 1980s, under Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, Canada negotiated the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement. It was controversial, it was politically explosive, but it opened the Canadian economy to deeper integration with the American market. And that trade expansion helped fuel growth in the 1990s. Factories adapted, exports surged, investment returned, and Canada slowly climbed out of the economic hole left by the early 1980s. In other words, free trade acted like an economic defibrillator. But here's the uncomfortable question. What happens if the opposite occurs? Instead of opening trade, the world is closing it. Tariffs are rising, trade blocs are forming, supply chains are shifting, and Canada, which depends heavily on exports, especially to the US, is caught in the middle. If 75% of your exports go to one country, and that country imposes tariffs, that's not just a policy problem, that's an economic earthquake. Now imagine that happening while interest rates are high, households are heavily indebted, and growth is already slowing. That's not one recession trigger, that's 3. And this is where the historical parallel becomes hard to ignore. In the early 1980s, Canada faced high interest rates, commodity volatility, and heavy debt. Trade pressure. And the result was a deep recession, mass unemployment, and years of economic pain. In the mid-2020s, Canada faces high interest rates after an inflation shock, oil and commodity uncertainty, debt levels above 100% of GDP, trade tensions with its largest partner. The ingredients look almost identical, but the proportions are different. Debt is higher, housing is more expensive, household leverage is heavier, global trade is more fragile. So if the same recipe is cooked again, the outcome could be even more severe. Think of it like two identical storms hitting the same coastline. The first storm hits when the houses are made of brick. Damage is bad, but survivable. The second storm hits when the houses are made of cardboard and built closer to the water. Same storm. Very different outcome. Now here's the twist. Canada didn't collapse permanently in the 1980s. It recovered, it restructured, it adapted. But that recovery required painful changes. Government deficits were slashed in the 1990s. Spending was cut, programs were reformed, taxes were adjusted. It was politically brutal, but it stabilized the fiscal situation. And over time, Canada rebuilt its reputation as one of the most fiscally stable countries in the G7. In fact, recent government data shows Canada still maintains one of the lowest net debt ratios in the G7, thanks partly to large financial assets and pension funds. So this isn't a story of inevitable collapse, it's a story of choices. In the 1980s, Canada faced a crisis and chose structural reform and trade expansion. In the 2020s, Canada faces rising debt, trade tensions, and slowing growth. The question is, what choices will it make this time? Because history doesn't repeat exactly, but it does leave clues. And the clues are everywhere. Debt rising above 110% of GDP, trade disputes threatening growth, a cooling labor market, and an economy still tied to global commodity cycles. If those trends converge the wrong way, Canada could face a slowdown that feels eerily familiar to anyone who lived through the early 1980s. Factories closing, unemployment rising, young workers struggling to find their first stable job, and a generation wondering what went wrong. But here's the final uncomfortable thought. The 1980s recession happened when Canada's debt was far lower than today's. So if a similar shock hits in the mid-2020s, the financial cushion may be thinner than people think. And that means the next downturn, if it comes, could last longer, hit harder, and force more painful choices than the one Canada barely survived 4 decades ago. History doesn't predict the future, but sometimes it whispers warnings. And right now, Canada's past is whispering very loudly.